Good Shabbat, everyone. Nice to see you here on Sunday School Bonanza. It's time for us to talk more about gospel doctrine lessons and get you better prepared for your Sunday experience, hopefully anyway. Please visit us at thisweekinmormons.com or send us an email, contact@thisweekinmormons.com. And, of course, you can find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Pinterest, blah, 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 blah. Just, search. We're great at SEO, so if you just search for us, you'll find everything you've ever wanted to know. It'll be wonderful. However, another new host is here in the studio with us this week, everyone. We love the fall. We get new people coming in. We experiment. It's very exciting. Rachel Murdock is with us.
Hi, Jeff. How's it going?
Great, Rachel. It's wonderful to have you here.
Thank you.
Guys, Rachel teaches Institute. This is our first ever Institute instructor, actually, I think, on the Bonanza. I can't think of another one we've had before. And all our hosts. So I think we should go to Institute.
Yeah, definitely go to Institute.
I did not much go to Institute in my day. My best Institute attendance was conveniently when I moved into a ward that has my now wife. There might have been ulterior motives for the reasons I went to Institute.
I think that's okay still.
During that stretch. Because I haven't been back since. That's actually true. My wife would go to Rachel's class, and I would follow my wife and try to find an excuse to sit with her and hope that I didn't smell bad. It was wonderful. Anyway, we're glad you're here. Thanks for stopping in and hanging out with us. We're going to have some fun today. This week's lesson, I believe we are finally at the end of Isaiah.
That's great. Isaiah is really long.
We started with, lesson 36, I think, started Isaiah? 36, 37, 38, 39. Yeah, so this is the 5th or 6th. A lot of Isaiah lessons, but there's good reason that we spend so much time on Isaiah because of the nuggets of truth all throughout. And this is lesson 40, Enlarge the place of thy tent. I like this one. I think this is what I like here. It's almost a shift in gears for Isaiah. A lot of the lessons, I think the church, at least in the manual structures, strive to sort of have them focus on individual aspects or topical things within Isaiah. Like the one preceding, we talked a lot about prophecies of Christ, for example. And, this one, though, we talk about enlarging the place of thy tent, which for the uninitiated, the concept of stakes is sort of derived from these chapters, if I'm not mistaken. I hope I'm not wrong.
Yeah, which makes sense because I think the term stake is very arbitrary. To be like, why is this a term for a larger congregation? But then if we realize it comes from Isaiah because we love the Bible, I think that's a great thing to bring up.
It is. It might still be arbitrary in the fact that they chose that. Because we could have been a diocese just as well or anything, right? I mean, nobody would have...
There's a lot of Old Testament terms we could have picked from.
We could have had parishes and dioceses and it would have been fine. But that's okay. So we decided to be a stake. And of course, if you do the attention activity, your teacher might draw a tent and ask you very interesting questions like, why does the tent need stakes? What would happen if the tent were not supported by stakes? And if there's no stakes, it just flutters away. That's my experience.
As opposed to the other Old Testament terms you could pick.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. So that's typically what happens. Of course, it's symbolic. Stakes are good. Awesome. The chapters we're in this week, by the way, are Isaiah 54 through 56, also 63 through 65 are discussed. Don't quite know how much of those we'll get to. We'll see what happens, though. So, the first part is the most real stake-centric part when Isaiah talks about lengthening your cords, doing things along those lines. I actually really love some of these verses. He says in Isaiah 54:2, enlarge the place of thy tent, and let them stretch forth the curtains of thine habitations. Am I reading the right one? Spare not, lengthen thy cords. Sorry. Yes, spare not.
Yeah, that's
lengthen thy cords and strengthen thy stakes. I just wanted to make sure I was in the right place. So, I like this counsel here, Rachel. So what do we have here? What are the key parts we have here? What's mentioned in this verse? I
mean, I think the idea of enlarging the place of thy tent, and it's such a great idea to think if we would need more stakes, right? If we're going to have a bigger tent, we need more stakes. So the idea is we need to have more missionary work to create more congregations and more members of Christ's church.
Yeah. And I like the way Isaiah describes it as stretching the tent curtains, but also like lengthening the cord is another cool way to look at it. I always think of the fabric of the tent, and I don't think about how it was back in the day because tents were not just fabric and stakes. They involved cords. Nowadays we have like the fiberglass poles or whatever you have, right? Same concept. But we have to stretch those out. That's how we cover areas. And I view that in my mind. I was even thinking about this last night, just thinking about this lesson and what we were going to do. How to visualize that. I was almost tempted to make a Google map and see if I could figure out the stake boundaries throughout the world, and you could see where the tent is actually covered. And of course there are large gaps where we don't have any tents at this point. The tent hasn't quite reached, Kazakhstan or
but I do like the imagery though of having a tent covering most of the world though. I think that's really cool.
It's a big tent. We're a big tent party.
Yeah.
Like the Republicans. Yeah. It's great.
Same idea.
Yeah. But also what I like is there's the other little bit right there at the end that's easy to miss. And he also says, strengthen thy stakes. So, of course, first we talk about full-time missionaries with the cords, sharing the gospel with our friends and neighbors, doing what we can to broaden stuff out. But like anything else, if we stretch something too thin and it doesn't have a good support, it can invariably become weaker. And I feel like the church itself has been sort of we've been in a very interesting, almost transitional period, I think, the past number of years, ever since the so-called Mormon moment kind of came and went and all that. And it's good, but I view it as this thing where we can stretch out and people can be more aware of us. Our borders are larger in many ways. But there is the risk of that if we don't do our job as good Latter-day Saints to strengthen the stakes, to make sure those stakes are firmly planted in the ground, we could stretch ourselves a little bit too thin or dilute the power of the stake, I guess.
Well, and it's like the missions of the church. We have proclaiming the gospel, but also perfecting the saints. And I think that's what Isaiah is talking about here, that we have to do all of those things, not just focus on one or the other.
Yeah. And I think it can be frustrating sometimes for members because it's great that we talk about missionary work, and that's wonderful. And I don't know if we always do justice to the whole perfecting the saints element hand in hand. I'm not trying to criticize anyone's, role in looking over their congregation, but you're right. We can do a lot more to do all that. And so I think that's awesome. And there's one great question here I like at the end of this little section, which says, how are the stakes of Zion places of defense and refuge for us?
Well, and I like this idea of like this tent being a cover. And I think that's the kind of the idea of a tent. If you're in the wilderness, the tent's going to protect you. And so here we have these stakes that together are able to hold down like this tent, which is a protection against the world, I guess, kind of in a more like figurative way, just like if you had a tent for when you were in the wilderness camping.
This is a good way to look at it, right? The elements, whatever you may call it.
Right.
Yeah, the world. Yeah, because that's what it's there for. It's safe in the tent. It's warm in the tent.
Right.
Harm will likely not befall you in the tent. Cool. So that's the main tent part. And the rest of this lesson, we're going to deal actually more with sort of concepts of gathering, the millennium, et cetera, et cetera.
So what I really like, I actually talked about Institute last week about Isaiah in the Book of Mormon and Second Nephi. But this idea about, I think people view Isaiah as this great prophet of destruction, and saying, okay, the Lord seems like a cruel God in the Old Testament because he's trying to destroy all these people.
Yeah.
And so people, Isaiah gets a really bad rap, but you're like, but for some reason, Isaiah is important. Christ commands us to read Isaiah in Third Nephi. And what I like about Isaiah is I feel like even though he's saying there can be destruction because there's consequences for sin, but that the Lord's arm is always outstretched. And I think that's what's going to go on in the rest of this lesson, is that same concept about the Lord gathering with great mercies. And he's not just going to have great mercies on the righteous, but he's going to have great mercies on all of the children of God.
Okay. No, I'm just pondering this. I like that. So how? Like, what are these mercies we're going to have? Like, what are the mercies?
I mean, I think about
take me there.
The mercies of God. Well, we can, we can look into here, and like the manual is talking about, although Israel was scattered for years, the Lord promised he would gather her to the true church. And so here Isaiah is kind of talking about that concept of this gathering of everybody. And I think the idea is if he's gathering us, like we're going to have salvation, right? Mm-hmm. We're going to be gathered together before, because we're leading up to the millennial reign of Christ. So I think the Lord's trying to gather us before this millennial reign. And in order to do that, we all need the grace of God for salvation. It's not that we can be like, oh, I was so righteous compared to all these wicked people, which I think is a lot of times the Latter-day Saint mentality. Where
we can get a little Zoramite-ish sometimes, yeah.
I mean, I had someone in my class one time kind of make this offhanded joke like, well, the reason the millennial will be so great is because all the wicked will be destroyed. And I'm like, hey, hold up. We could be the people destroyed, right?
That was Bill Doolittle, wasn't it?
Obviously.
Did you kick him out? I hope so.
Like banned from Institute. He's like, finally. But I think that's the idea. Is I think we sometimes are like, well, we're obviously in the saved checklist because we like listen to this podcast. We go to church. We're super religious.
I would like to issue a disclaimer. Listening to Sunday School Bonanza will not save you in the eyes of your judgment. Just want to okay.
Right. Just kind of helps a little bit.
Sure. Whatever.
But I think we have this mentality and recognizing, I like this idea that even the manual is saying, by the great mercies will the Lord gather us, and that we also require these great mercies of the Lord. It's not just for the wicked sinners, because we are the wicked sinners.
Yeah, we all are.
Right.
A big time. One thing I love about LDS theology is, of course, we believe in faith and works. We believe, and it's something so misunderstood, though. People, especially our fellow Christians, see us that, they think Mormons, they don't believe in the right thing, because we believe that once you have faith in Christ, it's a done deal. And we believe that, and we do believe in our works. But we don't believe that really by works we are actually saved. And that can be muddled, I guess, if you look at some New Testament verses. You understand why people could say that. But it's great that we emphasize that, no, it doesn't matter. The righteous, the sinners, we are all only cleansed or saved through the grace of Christ, and that's it. There's nothing else. I mean, we can do everything we want, and it's still not enough, and that's why we do believe we're saved by grace. And we could go off on that topic forever, but it's true.
I love in verse, so the verse that this is referencing in the manual is Isaiah 54:7.
Uh-huh.
And it says, "For a small moment have I forsaken thee, but with great mercies will I gather thee." And I like that that's what it begins with, the saying that I forsook thee for a moment, but I will gather thee with great mercies. And I think that's a good reminder too, is saying that the Lord has not forgotten us, even if it seems like it for a minute, even if we're here thinking we're all alone, like wandering in this wilderness of like the Lord has forgotten us, but he has not, and he will but that applies to everyone. Even people that were like, wow, like some people's lives are really hard, but the Lord still has not forgotten them because he will gather them with great mercies.
Oh, for sure. And it's interesting to build upon this based on, I believe, the previous lesson when we talked more about the gathering and the concept of gathering, because the Lord gathers his people. But also the literal gathering of Israel is also part of it's up to us in a way too. Mm-hmm. I mean, we act as the Lord's agents, and that's something I've got a huge testimony of, that the Lord is there and can do anything, and he could do anything. He could appear today and just snap his fingers and put everything in order. But he, through his prophets, then through his 70s, and through his stake presidents and his bishops and his Relief Society presidents and everybody all the way down, we act as those agents to effectualize that gathering.
Which goes back to the enlarging of the stakes concept too.
Yeah.
Is that we're part of the gathering when we're supposed to be enlarging these stakes and these tents and having more members of the church.
For sure. And another part I like in this section is it does break down, even though everyone will have this opportunity, but it does break down in some other verses in Isaiah 55, who the people are that the Lord wants to come unto him, sort of, and find this safety in the gospel. I love Isaiah 55, 1-3, where it basically references all who thirst, which is awesome. And so what kind of thirst are we talking about here when they say they thirst?
I think like a spiritual thirst, right? And I feel like sometimes we sense, I don't know, when I think of a spiritual thirst, I just think about having like a void in your life, right? And I think people can feel like there's something missing in me. And so Christ is talking about, I mean, here Isaiah is saying all these people who are thirsting, which is, I think everybody, right? Everybody alive. They're like, what I need, like, what's the purpose of life? I need meaning in my life. I think this is spiritual thirst.
I really like the second verse in Isaiah 55:2 when it says, "Wherefore, why do ye spend money for that which is not bread?" And of course, bread in this sense is referring to like serious staff of life stuff. "And your labor for that which satisfieth not. Hearken diligently unto me, and eat ye that which is good, and let your soul delight itself in fatness." And of course, bread, that spoke very much to the Israelites, and I hope it does for us today. I mean, that's like, why do we seek for stuff to fill ourselves that is not the staff of life in that sense? Why do we do that? And yet we're prone to it as humans. But of course, the Lord is reminding us to seek out that which is good and be nourished by those things which are good. Don't just fill ourselves with junk food, whatever metaphor that may be.
And I like the manual kind of calls out that as well, and saying that if we have a spiritual thirst, we try to fill it with something that's not of God, then it's never going to quench our thirst. It's just going to kind of make us more confused and wasting money on stuff that's not satisfying.
Yeah. What's interesting to me as I think about this, whenever I see concepts of thirst, I'm reminded of the verses in Amos that talk more about apostasy, but that, people with thirst, they would seek water and they would find it not. I'm paraphrasing. What's interesting, though, is that Isaiah and Amos were also basically contemporaries, and they kind of ripped each other off a lot of times in sort of the things they said. So it's interesting that both of them, in around the same epic, were dealing with these concepts of thirst and of seeking righteousness and seeking living waters and stuff. And I don't think that's by any coincidence. So it's interesting to see once again how individual prophets could receive inspiration and share a message that followed a similar tack in a way. And I've seen that even in our modern day when we have different members of the 12 who say very similar things through inspiration. And so.
Yeah, definitely. I remember one time even someone saying, we weren't given this assigned topic, but we're all speaking on it because obviously this is important. And the same thing goes for this time.
Yeah. The other last ones here are pretty quick. The wicked who will repent, good for them. Promises extended to them are simply that they will be, lack for a better way to say it, just blessed. Things will be good for them. It's nice. And but I like that strangers who do not know the Lord will also be extended these opportunities, which is great. The mercy of the Lord is awesome. It's everywhere.
Right.
I love it.
He loves everybody.
Okay, in our last section here, as we got to start wrapping it up a little bit, the Millennium will be a time of peace and joy. I think you really liked this Millennium stuff, right?
Right. Everybody likes the Millennium stuff.
I like the Willennium.
Yeah.
Don't laugh at me, wife. I see you. Will Smith forever. That's all. Continue.
I mean, I like this. I think it's kind of like reading science fiction to be like, what exactly is this millennium going to be like? It sounds kind of strange to me. But this idea of like, here's Christ's 1,000-year reign and how we have to prepare for it. And while Satan is bound for 1,000 years, what will life be like?
Yeah. And it's totally the unknown, even though we have prophecies right here that say it to us. But I do agree. It's very, it's like Ray Bradbury or something. I don't know. Doesn't it? But let's look at some of the things that are supposed to happen or that will happen, not supposed to, sorry. And talk about like what they mean. I mean, it says right there in Isaiah 65, the Lord will create new heavens and a new earth. Okay.
Or like, what exactly does that mean?
What does that mean?
I don't know, because I think like our Earth.
You're the Institute teacher.
I mean, I wonder if it has to do with we live on this planet, and this planet is going to become, more like a different state, kind of. I don't know if that is what it's referring to, or it's just going to be new heavens and a new Earth entirely.
When I see new, I think of it as like a refresh in that sense.
Right.
Because we know that the Earth will be, of course, transformed into its celestial state eventually, and I can see the heavens also reflecting that. That's my personal opinion.
Yeah.
Anyone else listening knows, sound off. You do. People have great comments and they show me how dumb I am, and I love it. But I would assume it's a renewed heavens and earth, perhaps.
It might be about aliens. Like, we don't really know though.
That could be fun too. Sure. Right. That's a whole other topic. I mean, don't even get me started. If there are other intelligent beings out there, does this mean we have different species of divine stuff? Like, are we just the human gods?
Right.
Who knows? Who knows?
It's interesting.
It could be wacky. There will be great joy and no more weeping for the Lord's people. I think that one is self-explanatory.
It sounds really appealing, right?
People will not die young. They will live to be 100 years old. One thing I think we forget in the millennium is I believe people will still be born into mortality during that period, which is easy to forget.
Right. I think you kind of start thinking that it's like it's heaven, but you're like, no, we're still mortal. We're still working.
It's still earth, but people will be resurrected.
Right.
So you'll have resurrected people hanging out. But you'll still have people who are born and will live and will die, which is interesting. But they will, whatever happened, especially the post, I would almost say Noah era, when lifespans started dwindling, will sort of be redacted in a way, and we will live and be older again. People will enjoy the fruits of their labors. I'm hoping that's not constrained to solely the millennium, but that's good. I'm glad.
Right. You're like, well, things are really going to change then, I guess.
So here's one you liked before we were talking about. Prayers will be answered immediately.
Right.
So what speaks to you there?
Well, I kind of wonder, what does that entail exactly? Because you wonder, how do I want my prayer to be answered? I think about everybody I know, their prayers are like, give me a spouse, or give me a better job, or give me something I want. And so you're like, does this mean that your prayer will be, you'll pray for it and then suddenly you'll get it? But I think it's good. We can, the verse there will explain it a little more, as usually happens. So it's Isaiah 65:24. Mm-hmm. And it says, and it shall come to pass that before they call, I will answer. And while they are yet speaking, I will hear. And so I wonder, this idea of the prayers being answered, meaning that the Lord will hear your prayers, but not necessarily that he's going to just provide with what you asked, provide with what you asked.
Yeah, I think it is easy to say, please answer my prayers. But the answer to our prayers could be what we're not actually seeking. And that applies even today. Right. I think it's interesting, though, that it says that before they call, I will answer. Because the Lord knows our thoughts. So it makes me wonder if that whole concept of that I don't know, I've got my mind going in all sorts of places. Because the Lord does know our thoughts, but we pray to show humility and gratitude.
Right, and it's a form of work to get blessings.
It's work. I mean, we don't pray because like he needs us to. He needs us to not for the prayer itself, but for the things it teaches us about communication with the divine. So it makes me wonder, will he just like answer us now before we actually call? Because we will ideally have sort of learned the value of prayer and of communicating with the Lord. Right.
And I kind of look at this and I think, okay, so what's so different about this than it is now, maybe? And it makes me wonder about revelation and answers to prayer today versus the millennium. Because I don't think that I look at this verse and think, wow, this sounds so foreign to me. Because I'm sure that a lot of times before I call, the Lord has answered. And because, like we were just saying, the Lord, knows everything. Yeah. And that while I'm speaking, the Lord will hear. And I still think that today, while I'm speaking, the Lord will hear. But I'm wondering like how that will be manifest that's so differently in the millennial reign than it is today.
It's good stuff to think about. Well, we have to wrap up. Folks, this is a great lesson. Lesson 40, last of Isaiah here. And of course, it's called, I lost the lesson. Enlarge the place of thy tent. Enlarge your tents, everyone. Rachel, thanks for being here.
Hey, thank you, Jeff.
Guys, we're going to have a great time.